on my couch. It's going to show that I was sitting in my hotel room and laying on my couch.
Yeah. Dr. Nadler, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so
So,
much. Are we recording now?
we are.
Oh, we are.
We
I
are.
see it now.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So, Dr.
Thanks
Evan
for
P.
having me.
Nadler, MD, served as a co-director of the Children's National Obesity. Let me start over. Dr. Evan P. Nadler, MD, served as co-director of the Children's National Obesity Programs and director of the Children and Adolescent Weight Loss Surgery Program at Children's National Hospital from 2009 until 2023. He was also tenured associate professor of surgery and pediatrics at the George Washington University School of Medicine and Health Sciences during that time. His current pursuits include pediatric obesity treatment program development, authoring a book on obesity, and educating the public about obesity via his YouTube channel, website, and various media appearances. First and foremost, doctor, why the passion to help people with obesity?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Second of
Of
all, you
course.
can certainly call me Evan, or if you feel like you want to call me doctor, you can call me Dr. Evan. But I'm not one of those guys who's all uptight about, names or monikers or whatever.
Of course.
So why the passion? It's weird, right? Because you don't really know what's going to become your passion when you're growing up, or in my case, when I was starting my medical training, or actually I was in my surgery training already when I had my epiphany moment, which really came down to being at a hotel in Disney at the pool and just looking around the pool and seeing what was going on. And this was back in 2000, so 25 years ago, and thinking to myself, this isn't right. Like, we shouldn't be like this as a community, as a society. We've had, healthcare gurus like, I don't know, Richard Simmons or take your pick, but it's not working. So, like, what
Right.
can someone do? And so I just, right, pretty much then and there, leaned over to my wife and I said, someone has to do something about this obesity problem in the United States, and
Right.
especially the kids. And I think it's going to be me. And that was that.
Yeah, it's almost like I understand you're a doctor, but it's almost more like you're more like a teacher because the obesity issue in America is has just run amok, and it's almost like these values are inculcated since childhood, where you almost have this false sense of security of like, hey, I'm eating healthy, but everything is jammed with sugar. The breakfast culture in America is just hard to understand unless you've come from another country, or unless you've lived in another country where you have some frame of reference of what baseline healthy is. You realize how everything, it's like cereal is just, that's what you give kids growing up. You give them cereal. And if you were to actually extract the sugar and put that in a bag and look at it every day, I mean, you'd have a very different response. And yeah, like sometimes hard problems can be solved pretty simply by like, hey, oh, you drink Coke every day? Here's a bag of sugar. This is in every can of
Right.
Coke. And
So,
then you just frame the problem differently. And sometimes you get a much better response. And I know you focus on child obesity. So my first and foremost question to you is, um, Dr. Evan, is why do you, first of all, what is the real difference between, your typical obesity and childhood obesity, and how does it present different challenges?
yeah. So first I want to go back to your example about placing sugar in a bag. So I started my medical career in New York City, and I remember vividly going to a bar downtown. I don't remember Tribeca. I don't remember what part of town it was in, but I was waiting for my wife and I ordered a mojito from the bar, and they made it in front of me. And when I saw how much sugar went into that drink, I've not had a mojito since. Like, it was just like, oh my
Mm,
God, there's so much sugar in this one drink. I can't believe that. Like, I would never open up my mouth and pour that much sugar down my throat.
right.
Um, so anyway, so that I like that analogy.
Yeah. But,
But
but, but
the
sorry to cut you off, doctor, but I feel like the problem is even like one more degree of freedom deeper. It's like a mojito is like, okay, you might not know how much sugar is in the mojito, but you know there's sugar in a mojito. The worst is like that false sense of security we get that, oh, yogurt is healthy. We're eating yogurt.
Right.
And you don't realize how much added sugar is in that.
Right. No, that's true. But, I would also argue that anyone who feeds their kids or eats tricks or Lucky Charms, they should know that there's sugar in those things. Like, if you don't know that there's sugar in a cereal that has like brightly colored marshmallows in it, then you're probably you have a bigger issue. But
Fair enough.
but getting to your original point, and actually, the unfortunate thing, and I'll get to your question in a second, but the unfortunate thing is that now, because of there's a field called epigenetics. So,
Mm,
and the field of epigenetics is sort of how the environment modifies our DNA, our genes, and changes how they're expressed, and changes the proteins that they make. And so now the kids of today are being affected by the choices that their parents made before they were even born, because
mm,
their exposure to that sugar and other ultra processed foods and frankly it's actually super complicated. We don't know. We know sugar's bad. We don't really know of the different ultra processed foods, like which of them
right.
are as bad as we think they are and which of them are probably okay. But regardless, those epigenetically modified genes are now getting passed from generation to generation. So it doesn't even really, while it matters what you feed your kid, clearly, your kid is already kind of behind the eight ball because of things you didn't know about or think about when you were a young adult before you had kids. So that sort of leads into your actual question, which was what makes childhood obesity different? So, um, two things that are like really the crux of the issue in my mind. One is, I've seen kids as young as, let's say, 8 or 9 years old with type 2 diabetes. And those kids, when they come into my office, are not drinking 3 mojitos a day. Just kidding. They're kids. They're not drinking mojitos. But
So,
the
so
point is that they're not,
type two diabetes is not you're not born with it, right?
right. Type 2 diabetes is the one that obesity causes. So these kids, when I would see them, they weren't actually eating any differently than the average 8-year-old, nor were they exercising any differently than the average 8-year-old. And
Mm,
that was sort of like mind blowing and eye opening because, when I first started this 20 some odd years ago, 25 years ago, I was naive and I just thought sort of that the equation was simpler than it really is. And
uh,
so um, I began to sort of investigate and try to scientifically in my lab to try to understand why these kids were getting sick so soon, so quickly. And a lot of them were actually the kids of parents who had weight issues. Um, and so it's a long-winded way of saying that sort of the external influences, the post-birth influences in
mhm,
childhood obesity, while they still play a role, they don't play as big a role. Meaning I've seen families who basically have one child out of three, let's say, and all three children eat the same and exercise the same, and they're growing up in the same household, yet one child is struggling with obesity and the other two are
right,
not. And it really becomes their genetics, their epigenetics,
right.
um, that are driving them there. Now, the second part that's different in childhood obesity. So I consider childhood obesity almost like the purest form of the disease because you're not a food addict. You're not, you haven't been on the earth long enough to eat yourself into that disease.
Right,
And you, generally haven't had, mental health issues or childhood
right.
trauma yet in the youngest kids.
So, Dr.
Um,
Evan, sorry to interject here. Just I want to make sure I understand you correctly. So, you're making the argument that, we are our genetics and our environment, pretty much, right?
yeah,
genetics is your predisposition. So you can say you can have that natural variation amongst four kids, where one kid will be obese, but all four kids are relatively doing the same thing. You're making the
Right.
argument that some of this stuff is passed on through epigenetics through the parents.
Yep.
Like the epigenetics would be like the switches that turn on and off which genes run. So they pretty much kind of control which which proteins get manifested and whatnot. And you're saying that that is actually passed on directly from the parent. So because the parent is overweight, it's almost like that information is passed on to the kid. It almost reminds me of that study that they did with mice, where they showed how how like certain phobias are passed on through genetics, which I found very fascinating. And it almost explains why we have certain phobias to like snakes and stuff. And although we've never really seen
Sure.
many snakes or spiders, and it seems like it's all connected, which is quite fascinating.
Right. So first of all, obesity is super complex. So
Mm.
yes, I am saying that some of the risk is passed on epigenetically, some is passed on genetically, some is passed on just from the in utero environment that the baby's developing in. Like there was a recent study, not related to obesity, but we know that babies born to moms who have had either diabetes or before they got pregnant, or developed diabetes or weight issues while they're pregnant, those children have a higher risk of having childhood obesity or type 2 diabetes as a child. But we also just recently was published that those kids also have a 20% higher risk of developing autism, which is totally
Mm.
unrelated to obesity, but just emphasizes how important the in utero environment can be
Mm.
for these developing babies. And there's another study that was out there that showed that
That's fascinating.
sugar exposure in the first 1,000 days post conception. So that's basically your 9 months inside your mom and then your first 2 years of life. So sugar exposure in those first 1,000 days was also highly correlated with developing childhood obesity or childhood diabetes,
Mm.
which, makes sense logically for the outside 2 years, but people hadn't really thought about that 9 months. Like if you're a pregnant mom and you're pounding sugar, again, you should not be drinking mojitos, but if you are, um, you're exposing your child to, in that case, you're more than just sugar. But the point is that the, I think maternal health and what's called the intergenerational transmission of obesity are two vastly underdiscussed issues in this epidemic because, the reality is that even if we snapped our fingers like Thanos and changed our eating our food to the 1960s, there are so many people who are already epigenetically or genetically sort of imprinted that just changing the food supply alone isn't going to be enough right now. Like it's too late to do that. We need to treat everybody with obesity and fix food and get everybody exercising again.
Mm.
So it's got to be like a multi-pronged thing.
Right.
Um, but I
And
still didn't answer your question, which was,
it's all
so,
fascinating information, though.
yeah, I know. And I could talk about this stuff forever. Like it's my passion, obviously. And I'm, it's just all I do these days. And actually, when you said I'm not really just a doctor now, I'm a teacher. I actually feel like I've morphed from being a clinician to being like a patient advocate, educator, all those other things that are actually,
Yeah. Because
different, but
a big part of the problem is the mindset shift.
right.
It's how we
And,
approach even putting food in our body.
yeah. And it's the
Yeah.
shame and blame, the self shame and blame that
Yeah.
people have when they have obesity, the societal shame and blame for people who,
And kids are
uh,
mean to kids, so it doesn't help
kids are
either.
mean to kids. I've had families where even the parents or the siblings are bullying the kid in the family that has weight issues, which is
Mm.
tragic to see. But the other key, because I got to answer this part of your question, the other key difference with childhood obesity is it actually progresses faster from sort of a pre-disease state to a disease state. Meaning, if you have prediabetes or insulin resistance as a child and your weight is left untreated, your progression to type 2 diabetes is actually faster if you're an adolescent or child than it is if you're an adult.
And people
So,
need to wrap their head around the ramifications of diabetes. It is the door opener for all sorts of chronic illness. And once diabetes kicks in, it's like you're fighting an uphill battle. And to have
totally.
to worry about that early on is sounds very scary. I mean, so
Yeah.
doctor, just to
Well,
talk about, yeah, so on a
no, I was just going
personal
to say,
note, yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
No, we have a second lag. I apologize, but go ahead.
Uh, no, I was just going to say that, when, so I've been doing bariatric surgery, weight loss surgery, metabolic surgery, whatever you want to call it. I've been doing that in kids for 20 years. And in the early days, when I would see, let's say an 8 or 9 year old with type 2 diabetes, I would think to myself, well, I know in the adult world or in older adolescents, the best cure is actually bariatric surgery. But now I'm
Mm,
talking about 8 and 9 year olds. And
right,
like it initially I would, I'm always transparent. I'm from New Jersey, so I can't help it. Um, and I would just say to the families, I'd say, listen, I know that the best way to treat your child would be bariatric surgery if your child were 14 or 50, or if your kid was 25. I don't 100% know at 8 or 9, but I think it's still the right thing to do. But you need to understand that, like I'm the first person in the country who's doing this surgery on kids that young, and that I only know what I know. And,
right,
and to be honest, most of the families at that point, many of them, again, the parents had diabetes or bariatric surgery or both. And they were like, yeah, no, I don't want my kid to have to go through what I've been going through with giving myself insulin and, doing all these other things and worrying about my blood pressure and my kidneys and my, um, you know, all the other problems that go with diabetes. So when you
right.
say that, diabetes is scary, it is a scary and bad disease for sure.
Yeah. On a personal note, so I cut sugar out. I cut added sugar out of my diet 2 years ago. It is like a religion of mine. And I do intermittent fasting. So I fast 18 to 20 hours a day. And for me, it's about longevity. For me, I really have one main objective short term is to keep my blood sugar levels as low as possible. I almost act like I am diabetic and I shop in the diabetic section and people think I'm absolutely crazy. But when
Do
I
you
go
wear a
there,
CGM? Do you wear a CGM?
I was about to. I prick myself now. I would love to get on a long-term tool. So one of them I need to be prescribed, and then I think then they sell some that you don't. But yeah, it's all about longevity, and it's all about. It's kind of like once you hit certain like being pre-diabetic or diabetic, it's like I personally think keeping your blood sugar levels low is one of like the best things you can do for a healthy long life. And I wonder. I mean, is this like any like is this even a conversation you have with younger kids? It's like, hey,
Well,
processed sugar
so
and fasting.
yeah, well, so intermittent fasting in kids actually is an interesting topic. Not one that I know has been tried very often. I've had, so I had a medical weight loss program, medical weight management program that was with my surgical weight management program. We often talked about whether intermittent fasting would be appropriate for, again, 15-year-olds. And the answer was that we didn't know, and we ended up, I don't think anybody's really studied it well enough to know.
Right.
We certainly talk about, the first thing I tell any patient who comes in my office who's struggling with weight is to just to get rid of sugar. I mean, that's like the easiest
Right.
and simplest and probably the most effective intervention anybody can make. The body's good at regulating sugar up to a certain degree. And so what I don't know are, frankly, in people like you, is there an added benefit to, normal glucose somewhere 60 to 100? is there a benefit if your personal blood sugar level, blood glucose level is 65 instead of 85? Like, I don't think anybody knows that. Um,
Mm.
I think there's, there's the longevity world is really interesting to me. And, um, again, I don't know that we have a lot of really good information on it.
Yeah.
I think, I think there are people, obviously, what's his name? Brian Johnson, the guy who's spending $2 million a year on his
Yeah.
longevity and blogging about it. Like, I think it's informative. I think it's
But there's
interesting.
Peter Attia, who I like
Yeah.
personally am a
Yeah.
pretty good fan of, and but yeah, it is a very hand wavy field right
And,
now.
yeah.
But the
And I'm
one thing
not,
we do know is fasting somehow is beneficial. Like I think that's one thing that
so yes and no, because I can also, there are the studies actually that have looked at how intermittent fasting works for um, weight actually show that it doesn't do any better than a sort of standard Mediterranean diet or
right, or
other
caloric
diets
restriction or
calorie
right.
restriction, right? So when people ask me about it, I say, listen, if that's what you need to do, like if you can't,
Right. So
if
what
you,
you're saying is like the intermittent fasting, is it just caloric deficiency, or is there something about like turning your digestive system off for 18 hours
right,
a day?
and
Right.
again,
The
I
jury
don't,
is still out on that. I have read up on
right,
like,
yeah, and I never tell any patient or person, don't do what works for you, right? So if it works for you, have at it. Like, do it.
yeah.
Like, I'm not going to tell you that not to do it. I just don't know how
We
it
don't know
works.
exactly why it works, and
Right.
if we're going to get surgical on what the benefits are, yeah, it's just a little gray.
Yeah. But again, for
Agreed.
you personally, if it works for your lifestyle and it keeps you in a, you know,
Yeah, I mean, that's
a psychological place that works for you, even if maybe it's not doing diddly for your actual health, your physical health, but it's doing something for your mental health because
right.
you're feeling like you're in control of your life and you're in control of your health. And that's
Exactly.
good. And that's
Exactly,
good,
because
right?
I used
That's
to
what we
run
want.
3 miles a day just to keep my weight, and it felt so unsustainable. It's like I'm plus minus 10 pounds. I have to run my brains out every single day,
Yeah.
and I prefer to subscribe to something called progressive extremism, where I take on these tiny commitments that I can integrate as to a natural part of my life, where it almost seems effortless, and it all just naturally becomes a part of my identity. And I think constantly taking those tiny steps, for example, if sugar is a big issue and stopping sugar seems impossible, you can give yourself some quirky rules. Like, I just can't have soda in the house, right?
Yeah.
If you want soda,
No,
you drink it outside the house. And then you kind of take on these tiny commitments. And before you know, you've taken some pretty serious and effective steps forward that almost seem possible. It almost seems simple. And that's the problem with these New Year's resolutions. And we throw the kitchen sink at problems and we subscribe to a system that's truly unsustainable. You end up getting back to that equilibrium point.
yeah.
And,
So it's actually, I mean, I've never heard the term progressive extremism, although I kind of like it. Um, and what you're describing, frankly, is what I used to tell my patients, which is, when they come to the office, I would say, how much sugar soda do you drink? Or how much sugar sweetened beverages do you drink? Whatever they say. Okay. Okay. So I'm not going to tell you to change your entire diet today because that's never going to work and you're going to get frustrated. And I don't even know, do you think you can stop sugar sweetened beverages altogether? Or do you need to like just go from 4 a day to 2 a day? Like what goal can you accomplish between now and the next time I see you so that the next time I see you, we can build on that goal? And if they get off of sugar, which is like you're doing, and like I've said, is like the number one, then we move to chips or whatever the next sort of dietary downfall is for that
mm,
particular kid. And it does obviously make them healthier metabolically. It doesn't usually result in a lot of weight loss, but it results in some. Um, and that positive feedback is good for the kids. Um,
right.
and then we talk about what's next. Like if you don't lose enough weight from diet and exercise, which has been shown to for most people, it's about 5 to 7% of your body weight is what you can lose with diet and exercise. And for my 300-pound teenagers, that's 20 pounds or so. And, if you're unhealthy at 300, you're going to be unhealthy at 280. So, it's just, again, like when I first started doing this, people thought that I was somehow not supportive of diet and exercise because I would talk all the time about how diet and exercise wasn't enough. And I still to this day have to correct people and say, no, I'm not against these things. Everybody should do them. I do them myself. I want every human to be healthier. And by eating better and exercising more, every human will be healthier. The issue is for the 140 million adults and the 15 million children who have obesity, that won't be enough.
Right. So doctor, my question to you is, where do you see this industry heading in the next 5 to 10 years? Both with respect to the advancements of technology, uh, and with respect to the mindset of American values.
Yeah. So I think that where we will go, well, where we need to go and where we will go are probably two completely um, separate things. But I think that what people need to understand is the disease of obesity is a disease that needs to be treated, and then and that will help you prevent obesity in the future or obesity related complications in the next generation. And so I actually think in 10 years, um, the industry now has these GLP-1 medications, obviously the ones that are injectable, everybody
Ozempic,
knows
yeah.
about, but they're coming out with pill forms, and those will be out probably in 2026 sometime. And they're not
Mm.
quite as effective as the injections, but they're pretty good. And I actually think where we're going to end up going is that the adults who are taking statins or high blood pressure pills or whatever they're taking for their heart or diabetes meds, they will all be taking a GLP-1 pill instead, because I think it's actually just going to be more cost effective once they can get the pills to a cheap enough price point and a supply chain and production so that they can be, just like, I mean, the statins, like every adult my age is on a statin, except for me, luckily. But most of them are. And I think what that will do in terms of mindset is I do think it will help with, because the GLP-1 um, medications do tune out that food noise. I think it will help change, or at least I hope it will help change the mindset where people will start to really realize that it's a disease, and it's a disease that needs to be addressed as early as possible. And as a culture, we've sort of forgotten about, I mean, 140 million Americans is like 40% of our adult population. We've sort of
Right.
forgotten about those people. And I'm hoping that we sort of, you know, turn back the clock. Again, I think we're going to need, I think it has to be a multi-pronged approach where we're going to have to treat the current generation while we work on preventing the next generation. Because if we only work on preventing the next generation, let's say with getting rid of ultra processed foods, um, the current generation will still be sick. And that, again, the genetic and the epigenetic pressures in the current generation will make preventing it in the next generation harder.
Mm. Well said, doctor. And how
So,
could
again,
people? Yeah,
go
sorry,
ahead.
go
Sorry.
ahead.
No, no.
So how could people get in touch with you?
Oh, well, that's easy, actually. So, first of all, I mean, don't put out my cell phone number, although I know you have it. The
Yeah.
actually, I don't. It wouldn't even bother me. I just ignore it. But
Four
the
o'clock texts.
exactly. I
Should
love
I
it.
have these marshmallows? Just take a photo.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like that's where I mean, that's another whole topic, but
Conversation.
that's
Yeah.
where AI can help. And I think that is another place we're going to be going as a society where your, you know, your
The
wearables, your cell
progression of
phone.
natural language processors are surprising us in industries we really didn't think would be. Like when we were talking about the emergence of AI and what fields it would dominate first, it kind of pulled a fast one on us. Like there are certain disciplines like art, music, that was just like, whoa, like the progression is really good, really, really interesting. And yeah, and doctors are one of those like highly disciplined areas where, AI is like a PhD level assistant right at your, to give you not necessarily like start to finish advice, but it does an amazing job at nudging you in the right direction.
Right. And so I totally agree that, so there are a lot of people who are out there saying that AI is going to replace docs, which I don't think it will. But I do think what you just said is likely to happen, which is, um, I may use AI to help me narrow my differential diagnosis or my treatment
Right.
plan or
And it
whatever.
would almost be malpractice not to. Like
Right.
that's where we're going. Yeah.
Right. But then I'll go through and I'll be like, okay, well, this is where this is a hallucination, or this is where it's not right. And let me
Right.
tweak this, because as everyone knows, the AI models are only as good as what's on the internet, right? It can't go
Right.
into my brain
Right.
and at least not yet, and take out
Yeah.
what I know
And
unless
and
I've
and for
published it
those
somewhere or written it somewhere.
right. And for those
Um,
systematic, patternized processes like brute force, grunty jobs, it's really going to help you focus on what makes you, Dr. Evan, exceptional. You're going to do more of that, and the stuff that can be patternized and delegated is where, Mr. GPT is going to come into play.
yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think it's again super interesting to me, super interesting field, and where it can help with obesity management. Certainly, you can imagine, yeah, what when your wearables are telling you not to do stuff, right? If they're like in your face, in your grill, telling you, stay away from X, or do more of Y, or whatever it is.
Mm,
Um, but so so first of all, my YouTube channel and my website are both called Obesity Explained, and there are a lot of resources on those two areas where people can just, even without contacting me, or they don't want any human interaction, they can just go watch the videos or the shorts or whatever. Um, but
wonderful.
I'm always open to people just emailing me, because, I think people need help. And that's why I actually started this pediatric telemedicine weight management practice, is because it's too hard
Amazing.
for kids to get access to care for weight management. If they happen to be lucky enough to live in a city where there's a program, those programs still have like hundreds of patients waiting lists. And, and then they have to take a day off from school, and their parents have to take a day off from work. And so I actually think that's another arena where the digital world is going to change what we do. I think you'll still see your doctor. You might just not see them as often. You might just see them
Right.
online more, and then in person, when you need to. Um, but my email address is my first name dot my last name, so Evan.Nadler, and then my initials, which are EPNMD.com. So hopefully that's easy enough for people
Amazing.
to remember. And yeah, I'm always open to, you know answering emails or connecting with people or going on podcasts, or like, you can tell that this is what I want to talk about, because I really want to change the
Yeah.
conversation. I want to get people, again, what RFK is doing with food, with ultra processed foods, totally fine. Have at it. No one needs dyes, petroleum based dyes. No one needs a lot of the other stuff that's in ultra processed foods. But don't forget about the people who already have obesity, who
Right.
aren't really be hugely impacted by those food
Right.
policy changes.
See, it's a multi-pronged problem. Um, Doctor,
Totally.
I appreciate your wisdom, your expertise, and
My
passion,
pleasure.
and just the great work you're doing and solving problems that affect everyone. So, thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to keeping track of the amazing work you're doing.
Oh yeah. Well, so hopefully I'm still writing my book, and it'll probably take another year plus before it hits the street. But when it does, I'm going to be knocking on your door or WhatsApp messaging you, asking to come back on to talk about this again. So
100%.
hopefully,
You have my number.
hopefully the content's been good enough that you'll have me back.
A
I
hundred
guess you're,
percent.
I guess your listeners will tell us.
I would love to have you back. So if you ever want to talk again, send me a message. We'll just jump on air.
Cool, cool. Yeah, it's always fun to talk about, and just trying to bring sort of real conversations and real dialogue about a terribly complex and really devastating disease. So that's my thing.
Thank you for your time, doctor.
My pleasure. Anytime.